The frost hadn't yet melted from the grass along Deer Hollow Road when Charlie Evans turned the key in the ignition of bus number 14 for the last time. It was March 3rd, 2019, a Tuesday like any other in the small town of Millersfield, Kentucky. The kind where people still left their front doors unlocked and the grocery clerk knew your name. Charlie, 62, had driven that bus for over 20 years. Every morning, rain or shine, he picked up the same group of kids along the winding back roads, including 8-year-old Nathan Collins, a quiet boy who liked dinosaurs and always sat in the third row window seat. Charlie wasn't just a driver. He was the kind of man who tied a kid's shoelace if it came undone. He handed out peppermint candies on Fridays, and every morning, without fail, his black Labrador, Scout, would hop in beside him, settle at his feet, and ride the entire route. Millersfield had a school bus policy against animals, but everyone made an exception for Scout. Even Principal Dalton once said, "If every kid felt as safe with a dog around as they do with Charlie's, I say let him stay." That morning, a cold fog hugged the hills. Visibility was poor, and patches of black ice clung to the curves. Charlie made his usual stops. Nathan got on at 7:34 a.m., as confirmed later by the Collins doorbell camera. Wearing his blue coat and carrying his Spider-Man lunchbox, they never made it to school. At 8:12 a.m., a dispatcher lost radio contact with bus number 14. By 8:35, the school realized none of the kids on Charlie's route had arrived. At 9:10, a search began. By 10 o'clock, they found the wreckage, just off Hollow Ridge Bridge. The bus had skidded on black ice, broken through the guardrail, and rolled into the ravine below. It was on its side, half submerged in icy runoff. There were no children aboard, but Charlie was still behind the wheel. His neck was broken. He'd died instantly. Scout was nowhere in sight. When first responders arrived at the crash site, they found chaos. Twisted metal, broken glass, and blood smeared across the cracked windshield. The water around the bus was freezing, ankle deep, and slowly rising. But something didn't add up. There were no signs of the children. Their backpacks weren't scattered. No jackets, no small shoes. Just Charlie. The search widened quickly. Helicopters scanned the tree lines. K-9 units sniffed through frozen brush. Volunteers from town trudged through thickets and muddy gullies. But it was Scout who returned first. At 3:18 p.m., Deputy Lisa Granger spotted a black dog with a torn collar pacing along Ridgeview Lane, more than 2 miles from the crash site. His coat was muddy and matted, his eyes wild. He was barking and tugging at her pant leg. She didn't know it yet, but Scout had been trying for hours. He'd appeared earlier that day on a neighbor's porch and barked incessantly. The homeowner, thinking he was just hungry, threw him scraps and shut the door. When Lisa reached for her radio, Scout bolted, turned, and looked back, then barked again. She followed. The dog led her through brush and tall reeds. She tripped twice. The path seemed aimless, but every time she stopped, he stopped. Every time she hesitated, he barked louder. Eventually, she lost him. Later that evening, Scout showed up again, this time at the home of Miss Martha Kent, a retired librarian who lived alone just off Granger's Hollow. The old woman saw him from her kitchen window, pawing at the door, whining. When she opened it, he didn't enter. He backed up, turned toward the woods, and barked. She thought maybe he'd lost his owner. Maybe he was just scared. She shut the door. By day 3, the search was frantic. Parents were breaking down. The entire community had mobilized. Flyers were taped to stop signs, gas pumps, School doors. Candlelight vigils were planned. Rumors of a kidnapping began to swirl. But Lisa couldn't shake the feeling about the dog. She pulled security footage from a local gas station and found a match. Scout, unmistakable with the white patch on his right leg, had been pacing back and forth along the tree line near Old Mill Creek for over an hour the morning after the crash. She brought the footage to her sergeant, but it didn't change the search radius. "It's just a dog," someone said. "Probably traumatized. They wander." Lisa disagreed. It was the morning of the fourth day, March 7th. By then, national media had picked up the story. 8 children missing after bus crash in Kentucky. The coverage showed aerial views of the ravine, tearful interviews with parents, and a blurry clip of Scout, the black lab, pacing roadside ditches like he was searching for something. Most believed the worst had happened, that somehow the children had been taken before the crash, that perhaps Charlie hadn't been alone in those final moments. But Scout kept showing up and pulling. That morning, just before 9 a.m., Deputy Lisa Granger spotted him again, this time near the eastern edge of Lawson Park, an overgrown municipal patch that bordered the old storm drainage system. When she parked and stepped out, Scout ran straight to her. He bit the cuff of her jacket and tugged, hard. She let him lead. They cut across a frozen soccer field, through a broken fence, and down into a gully thick with dead leaves and ice. The dog stopped at a concrete opening, barely visible beneath brambles, an old, rusted storm drain. He barked once, then again, and then Lisa heard it. Faint, so faint she wasn't even sure at first. A muffled cry. She dropped to her knees and pressed her ear to the metal grate. There it was again. Help. Emergency crews were called in within minutes. Rescuers pried open the grating and crawled through the tunnel, about 40 feet in, and there they found him. Nathan Collins, soaked, shaking, lips blue, curled in the fetal position beside a trickle of water. He was weak, dangerously dehydrated, bruised, and suffering from mild hypothermia. But he was alive. When medics asked how he got there, he whispered, "I followed the dog." As the boy was lifted into the ambulance, Scout sat at the edge of the gully, watching. His ears perked. He didn't bark, didn't move, just watched. Nathan was the only child who had made it out of the bus after the crash. He'd been thrown clear, landed near the stream, and crawled away from the wreck, confused, hurt, scared. He didn't remember much, just that Charlie's dog had come back, licked his face, whined, and led him. He followed Scout through the woods, through the night, until they found the drain, and he crawled inside because it felt safe. Scout didn't leave. For 4 days, the dog stayed near the drain, returning to roads and houses, trying to get someone, anyone to follow, until someone finally did. The news broke across the country within hours. Dog leads police to missing boy after bus crash. 4 days alone in a drain. Saved by a heroic Labrador. He wouldn't stop barking. Then they listened. In Millersfield, the story hit like a tidal wave. The Collins family rushed to the hospital where Nathan was being treated for hypothermia and a mild concussion. His mother, Denise, sobbed uncontrollably when she saw him, her hands trembling as she touched his face, like she couldn't believe he was real. Nathan kept asking about Scout. Did he make it? Is he okay? He didn't smile until they told him yes, Scout was safe. That same evening, Lisa Granger stood beside her cruiser, staring across the parking lot of St. Luke's Medical Center. Scout was lying on a folded blanket in the back seat. She'd refused to leave him behind, and Animal Control had agreed not to intervene, just this once. He was exhausted, shivering slightly, but his eyes were calm. She reached in and scratched behind his ears. "You did good, boy," she whispered. "You did real good." The days that followed were a blur. The other 7 children were eventually found, safe and with their families. They had never boarded the bus that morning. A delay in the school's notification system meant no one realized they'd been held at home due to icy roads or illness. Charlie had driven only Nathan that day, a fluke in routine, and no one knew, until Scout told them in the only way he could. At Charlie Evans's memorial, Scout sat in the front row, wearing a red service vest and a black ribbon. The small white patch on his leg had become a symbol. People brought him treats, medals, even dog-sized shoes. But the dog didn't care about the crowd. He kept looking at the casket, and then, for just a moment, at Nathan. Nathan, now seated beside his mother, stood up quietly and walked over. He knelt in front of Scout, placed both arms around his neck, and said softly, "You came back for me." Scout licked his face and rested his head on the boy's lap. That image of the boy and the dog became front-page news. But to those in Millersfield, it wasn't just a headline. It was a reminder that instincts matter, that voices come in many forms, that sometimes the one who can't speak is the one who's trying hardest to be heard. Scout didn't return to Charlie's house. Instead, he stayed with Nathan. At first, it was supposed to be temporary. Denise Collins offered to foster him, just until we figure things out. But after a week, there was no more question. Scout belonged there now. He followed Nathan everywhere, to the mailbox, the back porch, even curled at the foot of his bed at night. When Nathan had nightmares, which came often at first, Scout would nudge his hand until he calmed. When the boy was quiet, Scout was quiet. When he smiled, Scout's tail thumped softly against the floor. The bond between them had changed. It was deeper now, beyond words, beyond ownership. It was survival. By April, the ice had melted from the roads. The memorial at Hollow Ridge Bridge had grown. Flowers, candles, hand-drawn cards from classmates. Someone had placed a small wooden sign there, hand-carved with the words, "He wouldn't leave him behind." Nobody needed to ask who he was. Scout was later honored by the Kentucky State Legislature with a formal citation for exceptional instinct and perseverance in the rescue of a child. The mayor of Millersfield declared March 7th Scout Day. The Humane Society gave him their National Hero Dog Award. None of it mattered to the dog. He just waited by the door every afternoon, like always, for the sound of Nathan's school bus brakes. 3 years later, in a local TV interview, Nathan, now 11, was asked what he remembered most from those 4 days. He paused, looked down, then said, "I remember being cold. I remember being scared. And I remember his eyes in the dark." He smiled. They didn't look scared, just certain. In the end, it wasn't the helicopters that found him. Not the high-tech gear, not the manhunt. It was the old dog nobody listened to, who barked, tugged, waited, and never gave up. He had lost his best friend, Charlie. But he had one mission left. He had to bring the boy home. Final moral. Sometimes the quietest voice is the one we most need to hear. And sometimes the most loyal heart beats on 4 legs. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We tell true stories that deserve to be remembered, and heroes like Scout who should never be forgotten.